It was a gray Saturday. I'd gone to my mother's old house, where she'd passed away 2 weeks earlier, to help organize things. Nothing felt real yet. Her clothes still smelled of lavender. Her hairbrush still had lint stuck to it. It was as if she were about to return at any moment. I carefully opened the dresser drawer. There were documents, an envelope with cash, and a small brown notebook hidden under a pile of socks. I picked it up, not understanding what it was. On the first page, handwritten, was, "If I'm not here anymore, read this alone." My heart froze. My hands began to sweat. I looked around, as if my mother could see me. I sat up in bed and took a deep breath before turning the page. The paper was thin, yellowed. Her handwriting, round, slanted, seemed too vivid to be there. Something told me this was going to change everything, and I had no idea how. In the first few paragraphs, she talked about me. She called me by my childhood nickname, a nickname only she used. She said that if I was reading this, it was because she hadn't had the courage to tell me some things in life. My heart began to pound. Tears welled up before I even understood what was coming next. Share this story to reach further. Subscribe to the channel. Share this video on WhatsApp and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'll be very happy to read each comment. What came next took me apart. Page after page, my mother began to tell stories from her life that I had never known. She spoke of an abortion at 17, of a suicide attempt at 21, of an abusive relationship she kept secret until her marriage to my father. I could barely breathe as I read. She was never a very open woman. I grew up seeing my mother as cold, practical, and demanding, but in that notebook, she was human, wounded, scared, deeply lonely. She said she carried ghosts, and that, because of that, she was often too hard on me, not out of malice, but out of fear. Each page revealed another layer of her. The woman who ran away from home at 19, slept on friends' couches, went hungry, and still never told anyone. She wrote, "You thought I was strong all my life, but I was just a survivor, and that's very different. That broke me in a way no amount of talking could have. I remembered so many of our fights. When she criticized my clothes, my friends, my choices, I thought it was contempt, but reading it, I understood it was fear. She was afraid I'd go through what she went through, but she never knew how to turn that into care. All she knew was control, yell, judge." I closed the notebook for a moment and wept silently. The woman who raised me was a stranger, and at the same time she was a survivor. That didn't excuse everything, but it explained it. And that alone began to break down the anger I'd carried toward her since adolescence. As I read, my mind began to pull up forgotten memories. Like a movie, scenes from my childhood began to play out within me, like the time I asked to sleep over at my best friend's house, and my mother said no, with anger in her eyes. I cried. She remained silent the entire night. At the time, I thought it was just a grudge, but the notebook explained. She was afraid something bad would happen to me. She herself, at 13, had been abused during a night out, and she never told anyone. Every no she gave me was loaded with trauma I never knew existed. I remembered my 10th birthday. She forgot. She said she was tired. I cried alone in my room. Years later, reading that page, I understood that that very day she had discovered she had a tumor in her uterus. She didn't want to worry me. She pretended it was just fatigue, and she carried the pain alone. How many times had I longed to hear an "I'm sorry"? How many times had I longed for a hug, and "I'm proud of you"? And all she got was silence. The notebook showed she blamed herself for this. That on every page, she asked for forgiveness in her own way. It was a silent plea, but now I could hear it. The memories came in waves, some good, some harsh, but now they all had new meaning. I wasn't the rejected daughter. I was the daughter of a woman I loved the only way I knew how. And while that didn't erase the hurt, it began to heal the distance between us, even though she was gone. In the back of the notebook, I found something that made me shudder. They were letters written to me, but which she never had the courage to deliver. The first was from when I was 5 years old. She said how beautiful she thought I was sleeping, how my laughter made her days less heavy. I never imagined she thought that. There was another one, written at my high school graduation. She said she almost didn't go, that she felt ashamed of having been an absent, harsh, critical mother, that deep down, she didn't know how to handle my freedom. You were what I wanted to be, but couldn't, and that scared me. That tore me apart inside. Each letter was a piece of their soul. There were mistakes, hurts, apologies, And above all, a lot of stifled love. A love that couldn't express itself out loud. A love that hid behind scolding, demands, and silence. A love poorly translated, but love nonetheless. She also spoke of her fears for the future, of not being with me in the marriage, of not seeing my children grow up, of not knowing if I would ever forgive her. If you ever read this, I hope you see me as human, not as a monster. I read that sentence and felt a lump in my throat. She was fully aware of her flaws. I kept each letter like someone collecting pieces of a departed person. There, hidden in a notebook, my mother left a legacy, not of perfection, but of truth, and perhaps in the end, that would be more powerful than any apology spoken aloud. In the middle of the notebook, there was a flap taped shut. It was the only folded page, as if she wasn't sure if she should leave it there. My heart pounded. Carefully, I peeled off the tape and opened it. At the top of the page, a sentence. If you've come this far, you need to know the truth. My eyes skimmed over the lines. She was telling me I had a sister, an older sister, born when she was 16 and forced to give up for adoption. They told me it was better this way, that I was just a girl, but part of me died that day. I froze. I'd never heard anything like that before. The revelation paralyzed me. My mother lived her entire life harboring this pain alone, and I grew up an only child, unaware that somewhere there was someone with the same blood as me. She wrote that she tried to look for her, but could never find her, that she dreamed of seeing us together, but never had the courage to tell us. The burning question lingered. What now? What would I do with this information? My mother was no longer here. I couldn't confront her or ask questions, but deep inside, something told me this story needed an end. I couldn't simply pretend I hadn't read it. It was part of my story too. I tucked the notebook into my chest. The truth hurt, but it also gave me purpose. I needed to find out who this sister was. I needed to understand why this was hidden, and most importantly, I needed to know, did she even know it existed? Or was she condemned, like my mother, to silence? I went back to the notebook, trying to find any clue, and then I saw, in the corner of one of the letters, scrawled in pencil, Melissa, born September 1982, St. Catherine's Hospital. It was the only record, but it was all I needed. I took a photo and started researching that same day. I spent hours searching the internet, public records, social media, adoption forums. Each page was a mix of hope and frustration. Melissa was a common name, but the hospital and the date were quite restrictive. I found 3 possibilities, 3 women of the right age and city. I messaged each one. For the next few days, my heart was in suspense. No response, until one of them replied, "Hi, are you talking about my adoption?" I froze. Hands were cold. My breath caught. I responded carefully, explaining that I might be her sister. She was shocked. She wanted more details. I scheduled a video call. At the appointed time, the screen lit up. It was her, eyes like my mother's, a restrained, nervous smile. I could barely speak. I just cried. So did she. We stayed like that for minutes, just looking at each other, as if time had stopped. It was as if a piece of my mother had been returned to me. We talked for hours. She said she'd always known she was adopted, but never had any information about her biological mother. He said he felt a void he couldn't explain, and now, that void made sense. The connection was instantaneous, as if our souls had recognized each other before words could be spoken. After that call, my mind was spinning. Melissa and I arranged to meet in person that weekend. I barely slept in the days leading up to it. It was like preparing to see a ghost, a lost piece of my history suddenly given a face, a voice, and a life of its own. The meeting was in a small cafe in a nearby town. When she walked in, the world seemed to stop. She resembled my mother, her features, her walk, but her gaze held something different, sweeter, lighter, as if, even with all her absence, she'd been spared some of the pain that haunted us. We hugged tightly, a long, silent hug that said more than any words could. We cried. We laughed. We shared pieces of our lives, as if we were sewing a quilt with different fabrics, but belonging to the same origin. The connection was undeniable and painful, because time couldn't go back. She told me she had a good childhood with loving adoptive parents, but she always felt something was missing. When I asked her if she felt angry at our mother, she replied, "No, just sadness, because I understand that she did what she could in the world she lived in." That phrase stayed with me like an echo. We spent the day together. We looked at photos, exchanged contact information, promised to see each other again. But above all, we decided we would tell this story. The story of two sisters, separated by silence, but reunited by truth. It was the least we could do to honor the pain of the woman who, despite her flaws, loved us the way she could. Returning home after meeting Melissa was like returning from a journey back in time. I opened my mother's notebook again. Each sentence now took on a new meaning. I read with a different perspective. It was as if I were hearing her voice, explaining everything with the teary eyes she'd never shown me in life. I called my dad. I told him everything. There was silence on the other end. Then he took a deep breath and said, "I knew." The sentence hit me like a punch. He said my mother had confided in him about the daughter she'd given up for adoption shortly before they got married, but that she'd sworn to secrecy. And she had, for decades. I was shocked. I felt angry. How could he hide this from me? How could no one ever think I deserved to know? He tried to justify himself, saying he respected my mother's pain, that he didn't want to reopen wounds. But that seemed less like respect and more like cowardice. An easy choice that cost me dearly. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding. I needed air. I went for a walk and went over everything in my head. It was too much. I had discovered a sister, a secret kept for a lifetime, and now a father complicit in the silence. The truth was freeing, yes, but before that, it hurt, and I was feeling every cut. On the way back, I sat in front of the mirror. I looked at my own face, and for the first time, I saw myself whole. I was the daughter of a wounded woman, the sister of a lost woman, and the fruit of a truth that had tried to hide, but now shone brightly. There was no turning back, and I no longer wanted to pretend I didn't know. A few days after the reunion, Melissa and I decided to write a letter to our families. We wanted the story to be told by us, without distortion, without gossip, without fear. It was time to break the silence and put the truth front and center, for the first time, with courage. We wrote together. Each of us shared our side with honesty and pain. We talked about adoption, our mother's notebook, the letters, the search. We talked about the connection we felt, even though we had lived completely different lives. And most importantly, we talked about the desire to rebuild, not only among ourselves, but with everyone around us. We sent the letter by email and mail. Within 24 hours, the phones started ringing. First, Aunt Marlene, surprised, unsure of what to say. Then my cousin, crying on the phone, said, "Your mother had so much pain in her eyes. Now it all makes sense." The reactions were intense. None were indifferent, but not everyone took it well. Some of the family thought we were tarnishing my mother's memory. They said it was selfish, that it would only cause pain. This cut me to the quick. But the truth is, the pain already existed. The difference is that now she had a name, a face, and a voice, and she would no longer be hidden behind appearances. Melissa received messages of support, and also of coldness, people who preferred to pretend nothing had happened. But she was steadfast. She said she'd spent her life searching for a missing piece, and now that she'd found it, she wasn't going to let it slip away for anyone's convenience. I felt proud, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. After all that chaos, I decided to return to my mother's house one last time. He had already emptied the closets, donated clothes, and packed up books, but something still drew me there. Maybe it was the smell. Maybe it was the echo of her in the corners. Maybe it was just longing, but I went. I entered the room and sat on the floor, right where I'd found the notebook. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Around me, silence. But inside me, a voice pulsated. Hers. The woman who never learned to say, "I love you," while looking someone in the eye, but who wrote 70 pages trying to explain herself. I didn't inherit jewelry. I didn't inherit real estate. But I inherited truths. I inherited unhealed wounds. I inherited a sister she loved in silence. I also inherited the mission to break this cycle, to tell our story, to ensure her pain was not in vain. And that, in some ways, was the greatest legacy I could receive. I returned home a different person, with the notebook in my bag and Melissa in my heart. Now, every time someone asks me about my mother, I no longer just talk about the tough, reserved woman. I talk about the teenager who was forced to grow up prematurely, the mother who loved as she knew how, and the author of a notebook that changed my life. Her words, written with such hesitation and courage, resonate with me every day. And if I ever have a daughter, I'll show her this notebook, not to repeat the silence, but to teach her the opposite, that the truth can hurt, yes, but it can also set us free. As the weeks passed, Melissa and I spoke almost every day. It was awkward at first, a love that was born from scratch, but carried decades of absence. We were both trying to find a rhythm, respect each other's space, but also build what had been denied us for so long. During our first encounters, there was a certain caution, a fear of intruding, but gradually, inside jokes, silly nicknames, and late-night conversations emerged. It was like being a child again, but with the awareness of an adult. I found myself imagining what it would have been like to grow up with her, and it hurt and healed at the same time. We began sharing memories. We exchanged childhood photos, talked about our parents, and the fears we carried. In one of these conversations, she said to me, "You know, I always felt like there was something about me that didn't fit in. Now it all makes sense." And that touched me deeply, because I felt that way too. We started going out together. Restaurants, hikes, a weekend in a rented house just for us. We started experiencing little things we'd never experienced before. We laughed until we cried. We cried until we couldn't take it anymore. We discovered we have the same way of playing with our hair when we're nervous, the same taste in old movies. She wasn't just the hidden daughter. She was my sister, truly, in soul. And even though we'd missed the beginning of the story, now we were writing the rest, with freedom, with presence, with choices. This was what our mother should have lived. And now, we both honor that for her, and for ourselves. After many conversations, we decided to record a video telling our story. It wasn't for fame, it was for healing, for justice, for all the people who live in silence, carrying inherited pain and secrets no one dares reveal. It was our way of breaking the cycle, of transforming pain into voice. We kept everything simple, a neutral setting, natural lighting, the two of us sitting side by side. We spoke from the heart. We talked about the adoption, the hidden notebook, the letters, the reunion, the pain, the rebuilding, and above all, we talked about the importance of seeing parents as human beings, flawed, limited, but real. We posted the video without much expectation, but within hours, it began to spread. Comments from people across the country said, "I also discovered a secret from my mother," or "I found my sister after 30 years," or simply, "Thank you for showing me that I am not alone." Reading all of that was like a collective hug. Our pain now served as a bridge for others to cross their own deserts. It was bigger than us, and somehow, I felt like my mother was seeing this too, wherever she was. Maybe finally, she too was at peace. Pain became history, and history became healing. It all began with a hidden notebook, but now it was impossible to hide what had been revealed, and by giving voice to it, we created not only reconnection, we created a new chapter, one that begins with truth, and will never again be written in silence. After everything, I decided to return to the cemetery. I wanted to visit my mother's grave, but this time with a different energy, without so much pain, without so much weight. I wanted her to know, somehow, that the truth she was afraid to tell didn't destroy us. On the contrary, it united what was lost. I brought flowers, not her favorites, but the ones she described in her notebook, white daisies, simple, delicate, strong. I sat on the ground beside the headstone, with the sun shining gently, and took the notebook from my bag. I placed it on the cool marble. Melissa arrived minutes later, silently. She just held my hand. There, without saying a word, we understood everything. The pain, the silence, the fear, the unresolved love. We were together, by choice, by courage, by everything our mother couldn't do, but left us with the tools to achieve. It was as if, in that moment, she blessed us with an invisible peace. I spoke softly. I said I forgave, that I understood, that I still missed everything I hadn't experienced with her, but that now I knew. She tried. With all her limitations, she tried. And that effort, however imperfect, was what kept us going. The notebook was proof of that. When we left the notebook there for a few minutes, on purpose, as a symbol. Then I took it back with me. It was still ours. But now, more than ever, it was hers too. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Lightness. Over time, everything fell into place. Not the way most families expect, with Sunday lunches and smiling photos, but our way, with respect, care, space, truth, and that was enough. I discovered that love also means allowing things to be different from what you dreamed. Melissa and I started making plans, short trips, a possible book, maybe a documentary. Everything was slow, unhurried. We knew the wound was still there, but now, it healed with each conscious step we took. What was once a nameless pain became a story with a purpose. Little by little, some of the family reached out. They apologized, acknowledged their mistake in not telling anyone, or simply said, "I too was a victim of silence." We discovered that the silence wasn't just my mother's, it was generational, a cycle of unspoken trauma that was now, with courage, beginning to be broken. Today, when someone asks me who Melissa is, I answer, my sister, and also my chance at rebirth, because that's what she gave me, and what together our mother, even without knowing it, gave us. In her own way, she paved the way for something new to be born from what she herself was forced to hide, and so, from the bottom of a forgotten drawer, something none of us expected was born: freedom. The freedom to look at the past without denying it, to live in the present without pretending, and to build the future with more truth than secrets. And that's worth more than any inheritance. Today, my mother's notebook is kept inside a wooden box, along with photos of us, letters, clippings, and small objects that tell our story. Every now and then, I open it, not because I want to relive the pain, but because it reminds me of where it all began, and who I needed to become to get here. Melissa became a part of my life as if she'd always been there. We developed our own rituals, like drinking tea in silence when words aren't enough, or watching our mother's favorite movies just to try to understand a little more about her. Each gesture is a bridge between who we were and who we choose to be. Some people still look at us strangely, as if they don't know how to deal with a story like ours. But the truth is, no one needs to understand, because we were the ones who lived it. We were the ones who cried, kept quiet, searched, forgave. We were the ones, and only we know the weight and beauty of it all. Our mother remains a mystery in many ways. Not even the notebook answered all her questions. But today, I no longer feel the need to solve everything. I just want to honor what she left behind. The courage to not remain silent. The courage to face one's own mistakes. The courage to love, even belatedly. Her story didn't have a happy ending. But ours is still being written, and each page we write now is filled with presence, truth, and above all, choice. We chose to continue. We chose to live. We chose to love with what was left, with what hurt, with what was reborn. And that is all. If this story touched you, take a deep breath, because it's not just mine. It could be yours too. It could be your mother's, your father's, your brother's, your grandmother's, who never spoke about her past. It could be the story that lives silently within your family, waiting for someone to have the courage to open the drawer and face what was hidden. Comment below from wherever you're listening, but really comment. I want to know who you are, if you've ever experienced something like this, if you also carry silence truths. I promise I'll read every comment with an open heart, because this channel isn't just about stories. It's about reunions, about you feeling seen too. Share this video with someone you love, with someone who might need to hear this. Share it in WhatsApp groups, on Facebook, or via direct message. Sometimes we just need a story to give us the courage to face our own, and maybe you can be the instrument of that for someone. Subscribe to the channel now. Don't put it off. Activate the bell and like it, because here you'll find more real, profound stories of healing and reconnection. Stories that touch us, and remind us that this is what being human is: failing, trying again, loving even with scars. And if no one has told you this today, let me tell you, you are not alone. You are worthy. You deserve to be loved completely, without silence, without conditions, without hidden pain. Thank you for listening this far. The truth can hurt, but it can also heal. And today, together, we choose to heal.